Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're in the kitchen and we are getting ready to make something using our homegrown corn. So if you want to see what we're making, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, as you can see, we have quite a bit of corn right here. We have done, I believe, 4 plantings of corn, and we like to do that. That way we can have corn kind of throughout the summer and not just get one big batch and then be done with it. We like to enjoy it throughout. So this was the first corn that we planted, and it has been ripe for a little bit over a week. We started eating it on July 4th, so it was here on the 4th of July, which is not real common up here in Northeast Missouri. We consider that early, but this is an early type of corn. The ears don't get as big, but they are super delicious. And so we've been enjoying it. We've also shared it with our family down in Springfield, and this is what is left, and I need to do something with it. The other thing, I had just gone out to the garden because I need a few things, and our onions are just beautiful this year. This is not the biggest onion, and it's a nice large red onion. I've been picking the ones that had gone to seed or had the flower in them, and because they're not going to store well, they're fine to eat right now, but they will not store. Or if they've already bent over, I've been picking them. But the ones that are still standing up straight and growing, we're letting them continue to grow because they're getting really big. We've had big onions in the past, but these I think are the largest we've ever had. So I don't know if it's the variety, but I don't think we've planted anything different, but something is different, just the weather is perfect for them. And our peppers are doing really well. I just picked a selection for a couple of our recipes. I just picked some tomatoes, was out just a second ago, and these are our first tomatoes. Up here, tomatoes usually start ripening up about the middle of July. If you get a tomato by July 4th, that is a good thing, and it's an early tomato because we are farther up north than a lot of people. And also I've been harvesting herbs. This is cilantro, which I need to use for our recipe, one of our recipes today. So what I'm going to do is I am going to be canning sweet corn relish. And so some of this is going to go for sweet corn relish. And then I'm going to make a delicious dish for dinner tonight, and it's a side dish. It is a Mexican street corn salad, and it is delicious. We have really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. And it's super easy to make, and usually you have most of the ingredients on hand, and you can add or leave out things too. It's one of those really versatile recipes. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to chop up the vegetables and things that I need. We're going to do the Mexican street corn salad first, and so I'll need everything chopped up and ready and show you how nicely it is to put together. And then we'll come back and I will show you how I get the corn off the cobs when I'm doing big batches of corn, whether I'm freezing it or canning it, just some of my tips. And we're going to be in the kitchen for a while today, so stick around. Okay, so I think I have everything gathered up to make our Mexican street corn salad. And so what I have done was, you're going to need about 5 cups of corn, and I have taken my corn and I have grilled it. Now you can grill your corn outside, or you can grill it in a hot pan. Just cut it off the cob, put some butter in your pan and salt, and just get it nice and hot, and then just lay your corn in it And don't stir it much, let it brown, flip it over, let it brown, and that's good. I actually take a shish kebab stick, and we have a gas range, and I just put oil, olive oil or butter on it, and just hold it over the flame to get it nice and charred just a little bit and heat it up. And then I can take that and just cut it off the cob, and it will have a great taste in this salad. Now, sometimes I don't char or grill my corn. Sometimes I just use boiled corn that I have boiled on the cob, and I cut it off, and it is delicious that way too. So if you want authentic, grill it. If you don't mind it not being authentic Mexican street corn, just cook it and take it and add it to this recipe. It's great both ways. So let me just add this to what we have here. And if you have more, that's fine. You can add just a little more of the dressing, or you can add less if you have less. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take that. I'm just going to mix that in with the others. And mine's still warm, and that's fine. You can serve this warm at room temperature or chilled. Any of those ways is great. We like it chilled just as well as we like it warm, so either way. We're going to be eating this chilled tonight because I'm going to make it and then I'm going to stick it in the refrigerator for dinner tonight. So we need to add to this a couple of cloves of garlic, and our garlic did really well this year. This is some of it right here. Nice big cloves on it. Next year we will be planting it again, and it just grew really well. We're really happy with it. This is the first year that we've had an actual garlic crop. We've never planted it earlier in the year like you need to. We always tried planting it in the spring, but if you plant it in the fall, like in November, right before it gets really cold and the ground is too cold to work, it will come up and it will get really nice sizes. And ours did great, so we're real happy with it. So I've just added 2 cloves of garlic, and that's just really crushed up in there. Make sure it's mixed in well. Then we're going to add 1/4 cup of mayonnaise, and that's real mayonnaise. And 1/4 cup of sour cream. Now, if you don't have sour cream, you can use plain yogurt. That would be okay. If you don't have one or the other, you can use all mayonnaise. You can use all sour cream. It will give it a bit of a different taste, but it's still good. Once you get all your seasonings in there, it will be delicious. I am going to be adding 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, and it's just the grated Parmesan cheese. And it calls for green onions, and I don't have any green onions. I could use the greens off the onions outside, but they're big and they're probably not tasting that great. So I'm just using, instead of a cup of green onions, a cup of white sweet onions. You're also going to need 1/2 cup of red onions, and I think that's 1/2 cup. Yep. Yeah, it actually says 1/2 red onion, and I just figured that's about 1/2 cup. So those are the onions. We also need 1/4 cup of red sweet pepper, and that just makes it pretty. And also that taste is really good in there. You want to use some jalapeno if you don't mind jalapeno taste. And I am going to add this. I just pulled out of our garden. I'm not real sure how hot it is. I really didn't taste it. But I've got 1/2 jalapeno that I've seeded going into this. Now the recipe I just have a tablespoon of jalapeno, but you can vary that according to how well you like it, and that's fine. We also need 1/2 cup of coriander or cilantro leaves, and these are just out of the garden. I was able to pull enough out that we didn't have to get into the freezer, but you can use fresh or frozen. Now, if you use dry, it doesn't seem to have quite that fresh taste, but that's fine too. If you don't like cilantro, don't use it. You can use just parsley if you'd like. It tastes fine in it, so you could substitute parsley. Then you're going to add, let's see, 2 to 3 tablespoons of lime juice, depending on your preference. And I'm just gonna throw probably 3 tablespoons in there. And we're gonna give this a stir. And this is a really pretty salad. And it's not gonna have a whole lot of dressing on it. It's not like it's gonna be soupy with dressing. If you like yours soupy with dressing, you probably just need to add more of the sour cream, the mayonnaise, a little more lemon juice. But it is perfect this way for us. So once I get it pretty well mixed, we're going to add just a couple more seasonings. And it just is a pretty salad too. The greens, the reds, the whites, the yellows, all of that. Really pretty. All the way at the bottom. I just used this right here so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. This glass dish here. I'll put it in an enamel pan with a lid to store it in the refrigerator. Now I'm going to add, let's see, what do I have here? I've got a ½ teaspoon of taco sauce, but you can add more if you like. We usually like a little more. If you haven't seen my homemade taco seasoning mix, I'll put a link right here and it'll be in the description box. It's a good one to use. It doesn't have much salt, so you can salt your vegetables or your meat or whatever you're cooking with it to your desire. Mix that in. And the recipe also calls for some smoked paprika. And I'm just going to use some of my chili pepper powder that I made last year. I just dry it, grind it into a powder, and then I freeze it. You don't have to freeze it, but it keeps a lot better frozen, and it will last forever in there. So I'm just going to use about a teaspoon of that. And I think I have a half a teaspoon of smoked paprika. Yeah, we like a little spice. And that it's a little bit of a hot taste, not real hot, but it does have kind of a, I don't know, I think it kind of has a little bit of a smoky taste with it too. Now the final thing that we're going to be adding to this is a crumbled cheese. And the recipe calls for cotija, I believe that's how you pronounce it, C-O-T-I-J-A, which is a Mexican cheese, or you can substitute feta cheese because feta is easily found, whereas the other may not be as easy to find, especially in different regions or in different countries. So I am using feta cheese, and I've made some of this already, so I have about half of the container. So I will just use whatever's left in here, and it calls for 1/4 of a cup, but again, that is to taste, whatever you like. If you don't like it, don't add it. And we'll just stir that in. Now, if you'd rather use that as a garnish on top, you can do that. You don't have to have it mixed in, but we like it mixed in. That way it can kind of marinate in all of those flavors. Okay, so I'm gonna give this a little bit of a taste. Let's see, let me use this. And I might need some salt or pepper. I'm gonna add pepper. I haven't added any pepper yet. Salt-wise, the Parmesan cheese had plenty. And then of course the feta cheese had salt. Just add a little pepper. we're good to go. But if there's anything that you like the taste of and you're not tasting it and you want to add more, feel free to do that. And now I'm just going to put it in this enamel bowl. And this will last several days. You can eat on this for several days. You can eat it as a side salad, or you can use it as a dip for chips. Also, it's great on tacos. All sorts of yummy stuff. And there we have our Mexican street corn salad, and it is delicious. So I'm gonna get this all cleaned up, and I will be bringing you right back, and we're gonna get to making some sweet corn relish. So see you in a minute. All right, I got our mess cleaned up, and now we are ready to make our corn relish. And so what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've husked the corn, and I just want to show you this cute corn. It is cute little corns. There's some that are a little bit bigger, but they're not real long, but they filled out really nicely. And we did not have any of the caterpillars at the top that we have, and it is early. But then I have to show you this one. Isn't that a cute one? So this corn, if I wish I'd had asked Andy before he went to work, if I find out what variety this is, I'll put it in right here somewhere so that you'll know. But it is a quick growing corn, so it's early. It just doesn't get as big, but it is delicious. So I'm going to show you how I do large amounts of corn using now this is a fillet knife for fishermen. You can also use a carving knife, an electric carving knife too, but I actually prefer these because they have these great serrated edges. And this one has two sizes, and I'm not sure which one I usually use, so I'm just gonna grab one. And so using an electric knife is wonderful. It saves a lot of time, especially if you're freezing large batches. And that's what we a lot of times do. And this comes in really easy. You can also use a regular sharp knife. Make sure it's sharp, because if it's not sharp, it's not going to be as safe, and it's going to take longer. So I get some bundt pans, and different bundt pans have different size openings. And depending on your corn, this one right here may be too big. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's too big. It's just about too big for this one, especially if I were to use a little one like this, it goes through that hole. So I'm gonna use this one, and all you do, let me just grab one here that's a little bit bigger, hopefully you can see it, is you take your corn, you set the base of the corn at right here on the middle part of your bundt pan. You turn your electric knife on. And you just let it do the work. Now, if you don't want to cut into the cob part, just be careful about that. Don't go too deep. And it will clean that corn right up. Now, if you were making cream corn, then you would want to go back and with the dull side of a knife, scrape in that creamed part of the corn. But we're not doing that. We're making a relish. We just want the tops of the corn, so we're good. So I'll do another one, and then I'll finish these off the camera and bring you back. Again, just set it up there. And just let it cut at its rate. And if it is a knife that you use for fishing, be sure you clean it well. And then if you have any at the bottom, you just clean that off like that. And all of it goes in your pan and you're good. So for this recipe, I think I need 10 cups. So I'm gonna cut this. I went ahead and husked this, but I've got more back here that I might have to work up to. So I will bring you back when I've got all of the corn off the cob and ready to make our relish. All right, I think I've got everything out. I got all of my corn off the cob, 10 cups. Okay, so the recipe that I'm using today is called pickled corn relish, and it is a recipe that you can find on the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And that one is a government USDA site which has safe tested recipes. And if you are someone who always uses safe tested recipes, it's a wonderful site. It has wonderful recipes and wonderful ways of preserving, whether it be hot water bath, steam canning, pressure canning, dehydrating, freezing, all of those, and ways of preserving your garden surplus. Other sites that have good, safe, tested recipes are like the Ball site, Kerr. The canning companies will also have tested recipes. Now, a lot of us use recipes that are not tested, and those recipes your family has used forever and you feel totally safe using them. You know, you do what you want to do. It is fine. I normally do tested recipes. If ever I am doing a recipe that is not tested as a safe recipe, I will let you know. And very rarely do I do a non-tested recipe, but there are some that I do because I know there's enough vinegar in there, or I know that it follows the guidelines because you can swap out certain things or add certain things without it messing up the recipe. But I will always tell you if it is not a tested recipe. But you know, this is a free country, so you do whatever you want, whatever you feel safe doing, and that is fine. So the one that we're following today is a safe tested recipe, and it calls for the 10 cups of fresh corn. Now you can also use frozen corn if you'd like. Now most recipes, whenever we are using a canning recipe, the frozen foods can also be replaced with a fresh food. Very few times are you allowed to use a canned food to recan to something else just because of the over processing. You don't want it to just become mush. So usually we can take frozen foods and we can make canned foods with them. And I am using today some of our frozen peppers from last year's garden. I chopped them up last year and put them in quart-sized bags and froze them. I froze lots of small bags because we use them throughout the year, and it's very handy to have them already chopped up. We go through a ton of them. I do have a few left, and I want to use them before we start using our fresh ones in canning. Now I will use my fresh ones when cooking or making salads and things like that right now, but if I'm just canning something, I'm going to my frozen foods and getting whatever I have from last year out so that my freezer has more space for this year's harvest. I had already chopped up an onion, otherwise I have some chopped up onions that I would have used as well. So those are things that you can swap out. Frozen for fresh. Now you might notice right here I have a canner, and this is a steam canner, and I know a lot of you are new to steam canners, or you may even be new to the whole canning process. A steam canner can replace a hot water bath, and for years and years and years I did hot water bath canning, but I don't do it anymore because this makes it so much easier. When you're doing a hot water bath, you have to fill up a big pot with water, and you have to get that water to a boil. Then you have to put your jars in and make sure there's 1 to 2 inches above the jars, and there might be too much, so you're taking it out. There might be too little, so you're adding it back in. Then you've got to bring that water back to a boil before you start processing. And large amounts of water is very hard to get boiling at a fast speed. So it took forever, and not only that, but you had this huge pot of hot water or that you had to carry from your sink to your stove, and it just is, I felt like it was just a lot of water and it took up a lot of time. If you have a steam canner, the only amount of water you need is a couple of inches at the bottom of your pan. It's very simply made. It is made with a little rack, and your jars will go on top and the water is all underneath that rack. You also should have a dial so that you know the temperature of the steam inside, and that dial will have some sort of information on it to show your altitude, and when your altitude temperature is reached, that's when you start your timing. Now, if you don't know your altitude, you can very easily just type in your zip code and ask, what is my altitude? And you can search that in your browser and the answer will pop right up. And so that's very handy. So you need to know your altitude when you're canning, either with water bath steam or pressure canning, because that will change the time that you have to process. Now, I can put the water in here. I can set this on the stove, and in about 5 minutes, it's ready to put my jars in if I'm putting hot jars in, because hot jars need to go into a hot canner. Cold jars can go into a cold canner and then heat up. So it is very easy to use. Once the temperature registers up here that I can start timing, then I time the same as my water bath. If it's 15 minutes on my water bath, it's 15 minutes on the steam canner. So this is something I really like. I know they come in aluminum and stainless steel. Mine is aluminum. Mine is a fruit saver. I know they still have it on Amazon, but the dial has changed. It's probably a little easier to read. This one, sometimes the blue and the green that you have to tell the difference between, where once it goes from the blue and gets into the green, it's really hard to see sometimes that color change. And so you're sitting there looking at it real closely. And so I think the dials are a little easier to read now. So again, I've used mine, I want to say 5 or 6 years, and it's great. It's so lightweight. It's so easy to use. I recommend them highly. And I will put a link in the description box below if you want to purchase one. If you do, it's in my Amazon store. I will get a very, very small percentage of your purchase, but it doesn't change the cost for you at all. But it does help my channel, and I appreciate anybody using my links in the description box. So let's get started with our pickled corn relish. So I'm taking an enamel steel pot, and this is a lightweight pot. Anytime I'm doing relish, I don't worry about having a nice heavy pot like I do with puddings and things like that, because normally it's not going to scorch, because you're going to have quite a bit of liquid in there and it will heat up a lot faster. So I'm going to put everything in my pot. I'm going to take it to the stove, and then I don't think I'm going to bring the camera over there, because basically you're just getting it to a certain, boiling, and then it just, I just don't know that it's going to do you any good, and it's worth me moving my camera. But we'll see. Maybe I'll change my mind. But one thing this recipe does say that I'm not doing, and again, you choose what you want to do. It does say to blanch the corn cobs 5 minutes in boiling water and then cool down, and then take the kernels off. I am not blanching that. I'm just taking the kernels off. It is still raw. It is going to have to come to a boil and simmer for 10 minutes in hot liquid. And that is the cooking that I feel is all that's necessary. Now, there might be a reason for it, but I have made this before and I have never had a problem with it. So you can choose to do what you want to do. There may be a reason that they want you to blanch it first and then cook it again. I don't know, but I'm not going to do it. It may be that it's nice and warm. I don't know. I'm just taking it fresh off the cob and then putting it in the vinegar mixture and then simmering it. So it says here, we are going to combine the peppers, celery, onion, sugar, vinegar, salt, and celery seed in a saucepan and bring to a boil and simmer for 5 minutes, stirring occasionally. That's very basic. Let's go ahead and add those ingredients. We're going to mix 2½ cups of diced sweet red peppers and 2½ cups of diced green sweet peppers. And I had a mixture in my bag. I am just using a mixture. 2½ cups and 2½ cups is 5 cups. So I'm using a total of 5 cups of chopped up sweet peppers. It doesn't matter the color of them. It's just for appearances. And there's a little bit of a taste difference between a green and a red. But in this recipe, you need 5 cups of sweet peppers, and that's what I have. Now I also am going to add the leftover jalapeno pepper that we used earlier in our Mexican street corn salad, and that was half of a jalapeno, and it's chopped up finely, and that is still adding to this to make it 5 cups. Okay, that is fine. Anytime you are making something and canning it, dry spices, sugar, salt, those are ingredients that can be changed. There's things that need to stay the same, like the high acid foods, but there are some rules about things you can change without affecting the safety of your recipe. So we've got 5 cups of peppers, chopped peppers in here. Now we need 2½ cups of chopped celery. And I just tried to chop it the same size as my corn or a little smaller. I didn't want it to be huge pieces because I didn't want it to overtake our corn. Since corn is the highlighted ingredient in this recipe, I try to keep things the size of the corn or smaller. We also need 1¼ cups of diced onions. And since I used a red onion earlier, I'm putting a red onion in here. You can use whatever kind of onions you want when it calls for an onion in a recipe that is being canned. That is fine. Also, we need 5 cups of vinegar, and you need to make sure on your vinegar that it is 5%. Let's see, it says 5% acid, or the acidity level is 5%. If it is not safe to can with. So 5% acidity. And it used to be all vinegar that was used for cooking and stuff you would find would be 5%. But I've heard that people are saying that sometimes they're finding now some vinegar that is not 5%. So be sure you look at your packaging. The next thing we're going to do is add some pickling or canning salt. And the reason we're adding canning salt is because if you're using just table salt, it usually has an anti-caking ingredient and iodine, and those can cause the liquid or the brine to become cloudy and not as pretty. So just use either a canning salt, or you can use a sea salt too, because there's nothing added to the sea salts. And I usually use a red sea salt that works real well. So I said we needed 2½ tablespoons. And it does sound like a lot, but remember this is being pickled, and pickled things are usually heavy on the salt and heavy on the vinegar. So 2½ tablespoons. Now, if you did not want the salt, you could leave it out. It is not required. Then we also need 1 3/4 cups of sugar, and that's just white sugar. And that just kind of sweetens it up a little bit and cuts that acidity. And again, if you want to change that amount, you can. The sugar can be adjusted to your taste. We also need 2½ teaspoons of celery seed, and I did celery seed last year from my celery plants, and I've got that right here, 2½ teaspoons. And if you did not like celery seed, you don't have to use it. That's what's nice about seasoning to taste. This is a dry seasoning. It can be left out if you'd like it to. We also need 2.5 teaspoons of dry mustard. And if it said mustard seed, you could add mustard seed. In fact, you could add mustard seed to this, but I think when they're saying dried mustard, they're meaning the ground mustard. And so we will add 2.5 tablespoons. I might have said teaspoons, but this is 2.5 tablespoons of ground mustard. So 1, 2, and a half. I'm also going to add 1 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric, and it's going to give it a pretty orange color. So 1 1/2 teaspoons. 1 1/2. And so there we have everything that we're going to start off with. Remember, we have not added our corn. Keep the corn out right now. And we're going to give that a mix. And it's just kind of a slurry in there of vegetables in a liquid. My peppers are just chunky a little bit from being a little icy still, so we'll get those flattened out. And that is what that looks like right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over to my stove, and I am going to put it on a medium high, and I'm going to bring it up to a boil, and then I'm going to simmer it for 5 minutes. So I'll bring you back when 5 minutes is up. Okay, so the vegetables have been simmering for just about 5 minutes. My timer is just about ready to go off, so I'm going to go over there and get ready to put this into that simmering mixture. Then it needs to come back to a boil, and then I need to simmer it for 10 minutes. So I'll be doing that. Now, while I have been waiting for that to come to a simmer, and then while I've been watching it while it simmered for 5 minutes, I have been washing my jars. I have been getting out my canning supplies. This needs to be put in either pint or half pint jars, and it says it makes about 9. So that's what I'm washing. If I need to wash another one, I will, but I think probably 9 is about what we'll get. If we have anything more, if it fills the jar, we'll have 10. If not, we'll just put it in the refrigerator. So it looks like this is about ready to ding. I'm putting this in, and I'll be back when this is ready to put into jars. Okay, it's just come off the stove, and we are ready to put it into jars. Now, like I was saying a while ago, it is a recipe that uses pints or half pints. Now, according to safe canning rules, if a recipe does not have, like if I wanted to can this in a quart size, well, they don't have directions to can it for a quart size. They just have half pint and pint. Then if you put it in a quart size jar, it is no longer a safe canning recipe because it hasn't been tested in a quart jar, and they have no idea how long it takes to go to that temperature internally for it to be safely canned. You just don't double the time. So having said that, you can choose what you want to do, but according to the safe canning procedures, you must either can it in the size that it says, or you can go smaller, but you'll always time it for the size that it gives. So if this recipe was only for pint-sized jars, and it didn't say anything about half pint jars, I could still can it safely in half pint jars. I just have to can it at the same amount of time that I do my pint-sized jars, okay? I hope that makes sense. Now, there is another thing about this recipe that I did see. Now, Ball and the USDA have been going back and changing a few of their recipes because Now, according to the science, they're finding that some of the recipes that they thought were safe, there's something in it that they now have, I guess, the technology to test it better, and it's not coming out as safe as they thought. I think that's how I should explain it. I'm not sure. But one thing is they used to use flour for a thickening agent, and now they do not consider flour a safe ingredient for canning. And they now recommend using clear gel. And I noticed when I was reading this recipe, they do not have it as an ingredient, but I know this corn relish can be thickened, and a lot of the recipes that you're going to find have it being thickened. But since the ingredient wasn't at the top, I did not see it until I was down here in the written directions. And it says, if desired, thicken mixture with flour paste, 1/4 cup of flour blended in 1/4 cup of water, and stir frequently. And then you would add that to your mixture and then heat it to make sure it boils and it becomes clear. And actually flour will have a little bit of a creamy color. Well, I don't know that they have caught that in their downloaded recipes, because I think it would now say use clear gel, and it would tell you how much clear gel to use and how much water. I did notice in the Ball cookbooks, and they had a recipe very similar to this, just a different size and a little different ratio, and their directions did state using clear gel. So that is just something to look at and consider. So this recipe is tested for 1/2 pint and pint. I'm using pint because that's an easy size for us to use. If you are living alone or if you're wanting to give as gifts, 1/2 pints are really nice. So in order to can this safely, what you're gonna need is you're gonna need your jars. And I have not sterilized the jars. You don't need to. It's going to be processing more than 10 minutes in a steam canner or a water bath. So anything canned for longer than 10 minutes does not have to be sterilized. I have just washed everything in warm soapy water, and the lids as well. They don't have to be sterilized in hot boiling water. In fact, that might ruin the seal on some brands. So be sure you read the directions on your canning lids to make sure you're doing it correctly. You'll need a funnel, a ladle. I have a little vinegar to clean with. You can also just use a dry paper towel or a wet paper towel. I have, since this is going to be a chunky thing, a stick to debubble with, and then I have my rings here. So let's get busy. And it smells really good. And I did taste it, and the jalapeno is not something you notice. It tastes really good in there. And I am not thickening mine, and it's a really nice consistency the way it is. So it says to have as the headspace, let's look and see, 1/2 inch headspace on this. And the headspace is the space required from the top of the jar down. So 1/2 inch from the top of the jar. And when you put this in, be sure you're getting both the liquid and the vegetables. Try to keep it even. And a lot of times I'll go through and I will put everything in and then check my headspace. Or with this, since I'm not sure if I'm getting the same amount of liquid and chunks of stuff, I might leave a little bit less and then split up what's left. I have a feeling I could easily have more dried stuff than the liquid. So I'm kind of going lower here, and then I'll see what I have left over after I put this in the jars. But you do want the liquid to cover, and it does in the pan. So you do want it to cover your vegetables. And it's really pretty too, just those bright colors. And we got 4 left. Let's see if we can fill 4 jars. And I think I'm going to have a little less than 9, which is fine. Now there are a whole lot of different recipes for corn relish, and but you just want to make sure whatever you're using, you feel safe canning it. Okay, I think at this point, this one's a little dry. These just have a little bit of dry stuff at the top, so I'm going to top it off with the liquid. And I know I'm not using the funnel, but I'll be wiping my jars really well. So we're just going to have part of a jar for our 9th jar. Let me see if I can get it all out. And this will be our little sample, and we can enjoy it. Just stick it in the refrigerator. So that's how much extra I have. So let me grab a paper towel. Okay, so to debubble, what we're going to do is we're just going to put our, whatever we're using to debubble with, into our liquid and just try to move stuff around so that if there's any bubbles in there, they will fill in with our liquid. And sometimes it will drop the amount of food in your jar, and so you'll need to add it a little bit more and top it off. And this is a good time to check and make sure you got enough in there, or if you have too much, take some out. Okay, so I've got that. Now with my paper towel, I am going to use a little vinegar on it and just wipe the rims of my jars. That way that sugar and the little pieces of vegetables and stuff will come off, and our lids will seal tight. Very hot. Okay, once they are debubbled and cleaned, we're ready to put our lids on. And when I brought my pot over, I turned my steam canner on and I hear it boiling over there, so it is ready to go. If you're using a water bath, I would start it up when this is still simmering on the stove. And also remember, when we put our rings on, we're going to do that just fingertip tight. We don't want to over tighten them, but we want them to be on there securely. And if your rings don't feel like they're going on correctly, use another ring. A lot of times I will put it on and then back it off and put it on again. This one may be, ooh, that's hot. You want to make sure you are canning it right after you take it off the stove. Don't let it cool down. It needs to be canned hot. Okay, these are ready to go in. I am going to process them after it comes to the correct temperature on my steam canner for 15 minutes for my altitude. If you live between 1,000 and 6,000 feet altitude, it's 20 minutes. Above 6,000 feet altitude, it's 25 minutes. If you are using a water bath, you put them into a hot water bath and bring it back to a boil. Once it starts boiling, then you start timing. You do need to have about an inch or two of water above the lid. It has to be completely submerged, and it has to continue boiling the whole time. That way you know you're canning safely. So there we have our pickled corn relish, and we have our Mexican street corn salad, and that is in the refrigerator, and it's probably ready and chilled and ready to eat. I am going to put that recipe at the end of this video so you can take a screenshot. It will also be in on my Facebook page, Blue Rooster Farm, in about a day or two, so that you can get it right there too. The recipe for our pickled corn relish, I'll put the link in the description box below, and you can find it at that site. So I appreciate you watching. I hope that you learned something today, and I hope that you try one of these recipes. If you're getting a lot of corn, let me know. Let me know some ideas of what you're doing with yours. I'd love to hear some new ideas. Also, if you have not yet subscribed, I would really love it if you would. We are getting lots of subscribers, and I so appreciate that from all of you. I have one of the nicest groups of people, very few negative words ever, and so I feel very fortunate, and I hope that you come back again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.